Hi, I'm Katie Crane, and this is the Pilates Lounge. Welcome back, my friends, and welcome to Season 2 of the Pilates Lounge podcast. Who would have thought that we would have survived an entire year of listening to a podcast about Pilates? But here we are again. Thanks so much for joining me. My name's Katie Crane, and I am the Pilates professional. Now listen up. This season, we are going beyond the choreography. Whether or not you realize it, and whether or not you are teaching a mat class, reformer classes, or serving people with clinical Pilates, you, my friend, are in business. And in this world of Pilates, owning your expertise is as important as perfecting your repertoire. My name's Katie Crane. I am your host, and I've got over 20 years of experience as a Pilates professional, owning a studio, running retreats, running teacher training, and of course, enjoying my time with you online. I truly have figured out how to build my lifestyle with the work that I absolutely adore doing, which is why we're going to be talking all about you building your following, growing your confidence as an instructor, and how to get yourself seen. I'm going to explore with you how our industry is evolving, the trends shaping our work, and how you can stay ahead of the curve as a Pilates pro. It's really all about equipping you with the tools, not just to survive, but to truly thrive and to really love what you're doing with longevity. So whether that means that art of mastering connection, attracting the right clients, or elevating your presence in the Pilates community, I've got you covered. So my friend, grab your coffee or even jump on a machine while you listen to this episode and let's get into it. This is the Pilates Lounge, and I am here to help you step into the spotlight with strength, passion, and of course, a little bit of quirky fun. Let's get into this. Hi everyone, my name's Katie Crane. I am the Pilates professional. Welcome to another episode of the Pilates Lounge podcast. Now, you know, if you've been listening to this season, that we are touching on subjects that are all about the business of Pilates, because whether or not you are a contractor, an employee, a home studio practitioner, or whether you own a bustling studio, you, my friend, are in the business of Pilates. And over the years, it's come to my awareness, both from many mistakes that I've made myself, but also from knowing a lot of other studio owners, that we don't always go into this job understanding the business side of Pilates. So this season is really about you getting to know the how, why, who, where, and what it is that you need to be doing so that your business can thrive. Today, I have with us a good friend of mine, Kristy-Lee Billett. Now, Kristy is a nationally recognized HR expert. She's passionate about small business advocating. She's a podcast host, a mum, wife, beach lover, and runner. Now, Kristy-Lee has spent more than 20 years working in the field of human resources, people management, and recruiting. And for the last 10 years, she's really dedicated herself to exclusively to supporting small to medium-sized businesses and those who employ less than 100 staff with all aspects of HR, recruitment, people management, and resource structures. And I know that for a lot of us Pilates studio owners, 100 staff, like what does that even look like? We could not imagine. But trust me, whether or not you have one person who comes in to help you just for a couple of hours a week, or whether you have 10 staff working underneath you, all of this information applies to you. And I'm excited to be talking about the HR side of a Pilates business so that you can make sure not only that you understand what you should be doing as a studio owner, but also what you are required to do as a studio owner. Because when it comes to things like, am I taking on contractors or employees, all of this can be quite confusing, and it's super important for the safety of your business that you are up to date with what you should be doing, and that you have strategies in place and paperwork in place to make sure that you are offering your staff exactly what they deserve. Thanks so much for joining me, Kristy-Lee. I would love to kick off just with a little bit of a rundown of why you think that it's so important that we should have a handle on all of this HR stuff when my profession is Pilates. Why would I need to know all of this?
Thanks for having me, Katie. It's great to be here with you. And it's such a great question to start with because most of us as business owners, whether in the business of Pilates or anything else, we didn't get into business for the love of HR documentation or people management or compliance. And yet we find ourselves having to deal with that, just like we have to deal with accounting and bookkeeping and all the other things that we have to do when we run a business. But the thing that I have found to be true is that it's almost impossible, in fact, to have a business which is successful by all the measures and also gives you a sense of freedom from your business unless you have other people to support you. And as you said, whether that's just someone a couple of hours a week or you've got a team of 10 or 15, people that are instructors plus admin support, it doesn't really matter what that looks like. But without that extra support, you tend to not have freedom from your business. And no one got into business because they didn't want freedom. So no matter how big the team is, it's really important that you understand your legal requirements when it comes to people and engaging them and managing them to protect your business, because unfortunately there are fines, there are penalties if we get it wrong. And in fact, they've increased very recently. So it is really all about protecting your business. That's the main reason to get the paperwork right. And the people side of things is about getting the support to help you do business better.
Yeah, it's so true. I think most of us start out as a kind of a one-woman show or a one-man show, and we do all the things. And a lot of the time as a Pilates instructor, maybe we start teaching from home, and then that gets a little bit too much. So then we open a small studio and we think that that's going to make things easier, taking our business away from the house. But then we realize, oh my gosh, I've got to do the marketing. I've got to do, who's going to cover me for sick days? There's everything that I've got to do. So what are some, and then we start realizing that we need to hire somebody. Most of us start off with hiring one instructor. So a lot of the time it may be we start with a contractor. So let's jump into this straight away, because even this morning I'm with quite a few Facebook groups of Pilates instructors around the world. And this is a really common question. And quite often it comes from the person who is instructing. So this morning on Facebook, I saw an instructor had posted she subcontracts herself out to a studio, and she went in to teach the 3 classes that she normally teaches. One of the classes didn't have anybody in the class. So then the studio owner doesn't want to pay her. The subcontractor feels that she should get paid. I feel like that all should have been in writing before you even started, right? So in my mind as a subcontractor, right. So in my mind as a subcontractor, you are ultimately running your own business. And as a subcontractor, you are meant to be taking all of your tools to that studio. Maybe they provide the clients or whatever, but whatever you decide, that has to be in writing. Is not something that you can just decide along the way. Oh, well, now you owe me money for that. So how do we start out? If we are going to be a subcontractor, what are some of the really important things that we need to consider so that these things don't happen? And that puts a bad taste in everybody's mouth. And then, well, let's start by answering that. What are some things that I need to consider as a subcontractor?
Yeah, it's a great question. And this whole contractor versus employee debate is raging hot again at the moment. And there's a few industries, yours included, that it does tend to, there's a grey area there, but you sort of framed it really well. A subcontractor is in the business of being in business. So to be a true contractor, you are advertising yourself as a business, you are seeking business from multiple sources. If you are relying on one studio to provide you your income, you are an employee, really. There's multiple tests that we look at, but generally speaking, a subcontractor, or any contractor for that matter, is in the business of being in business. So they might be servicing several studios, they might run their own studio plus subcontract themselves to other studios. But it is a matter of you are in a business, which means you need to run that like a business. And as you said, you want to put in place contracts, terms of business, agreements, payment schedules, exit strategies, all of those sorts of things. But on the flip side of that, the person that is engaging you as a subcontractor, so the business, I guess I would say, they really bear all the risk from the employment relations law side of things. And there has been a big focus on getting that right. So Fair Work recently changed their rules around this. And there is a real onus on the business that is engaging the subcontractor to get the employment relationship right from the beginning. And if they are a true contractor, no problems at all. But it's quite technical, but there's what Fair Work call a multifactorial test to determine whether someone is in fact an employee or a contractor. And there's a lot of grey area. It's not always very black and white, but there is a multi-factor test which looks at things like, are you the only source of income? Does the person provide all of their tools and equipment and resources? Are they, seeking work from other sources? Are they just wandering under an ABN, or are they a proprietary limited company? There's a whole, where's the liability if something goes wrong? So there's a whole range of factors we look at to determine whether someone is an employee or a contractor. But as a contractor, you bear the risk. So if there's no one in that class, you don't get paid because you bear the risk for that, not the business. So that's probably an important distinction for that particular example, where if you're expecting to get paid for that, you're acting like an employee and that business should be engaging you as an employee if that's how the relationship is playing out. So it's quite a complicated area, that contractor versus employee, but you really want to be thinking, am I engaged here as an independent business, basically, is the distinction? Or am I really acting like an employee, and what should this relationship look like? And if you're a Pilates business who is engaging subcontractors, again, you want to be thinking about that because you bear all that risk if you get it wrong. And that can look like back paying superannuation, back paying payroll, PAYG withholding. So it can have a flow-on effect if you don't get it right from the beginning. But across the board, paperwork is key, and getting those contracts in place is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that happened for a long time, and I'm sure in many industries, was that subcontractors were not necessarily getting paid their superannuation. So as an employer, if you've got a subcontractor, you need to make sure that you're still paying superannuation separately, correct, into their chosen super fund.
Most of the time. So it depends on the particular engagement arrangement, but if it is swapping time for money, which it often is when we're an instructor, we're doing an hour lesson, for example, then generally you are still required to pay that superannuation. That's right.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a super important thing for studio owners to recognise. So what are the benefits as if I am an instructor? So seeing it from the instructor's point of view, why would I choose to become an employee instead of a subcontractor?
Really, the choice is up to the business more than anything, because they're the one that bears the risk. But as the instructor, there are some benefits to being an employee if that's what the relationship looks like. And it comes down to security a lot of the time, because as an employee, the business owner wears the risk. And so if they don't fill the class, that's not a you problem, that's a them problem. So you will get paid for that time. As well, there's things like if you are applying for loans and mortgages or any of those kinds of things, banks tend to favour people that are employed over people that have got ad hoc contracting work going on. So that job security side of things can be very beneficial if you are in a season of life where you are doing those kind of loan application processes. There's more security in knowing what income you've got coming in, because as an employee, if you are permanent, whether that be part-time or full-time, you've got some security over the week in, week out income coming into your household. So it's easier to manage from that perspective. And again, you don't wear the risk. So the business that you were employed by wears the risk if the class isn't full, if there's any problems, if someone injures themselves. All of those things are the responsibility of the business, not the employee. So there's often better protection if you are an employee and a lot less risk. But it obviously, in an industry where you are an instructor, it doesn't always fit. You'd be engaged by a studio that might have either regular classes that they know they need an instructor for every single week at these hours. But if it's more ad hoc in nature, you might be a casual employee, which doesn't have that security as much, or they may choose to go down the contractor path if the engagement is truly a contractor arrangement.
Okay. And I think what is super common in our industry is that you do end up teaching the same classes week in, week out. So if you are either working as a subcontractor or even if you are a casual employee, is there a point in time, like legally, as far as the framework is concerned, where that subcontractor does need to be offered a casual position? And is there a point in time when a casual position needs to become permanent part-time?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So if you're a contractor and you're doing that regular classwork, it doesn't necessarily at any point translate into an employee-employer relationship, provided it still meets that multifactorial test where you are acting as and performing the role of a contractor. And that means things like you can delegate the work out to someone else if you choose to. You have complete say in how you do the work, so how you run the class. So you've got a lot more autonomy as a contractor. But if the contractor arrangement is still in place, there's no legal requirement for that to transfer to an employee unless the relationship changes and it transfers to an employment relationship. On the flip side, though, a casual employee does have some rights to transfer to a permanent employee if the nature of the employment relationship changes. And that often happens when someone is employed on an ad hoc basis, so a class here and there, for example, and over time that becomes regular work. So they're doing the same class week in, week out for an extended period of time. A casual employee has then the right to ask to transfer to permanency, and the employer generally has to grant that unless there are reasonable business grounds. Now, that timing and that time frame does vary depending on whether the business is what Fair Work consider a small business, which is probably most of the audience here. So a small business in Fair Work size is 15 or fewer employees. 14 or fewer employees, so under 15. And you would have to be working regular, systematic hours for at least 12 months before you could request that casual conversion, we call it. And as the employer in that scenario, there's a couple of things you need to be doing to comply, and that is giving that employee a statement, which we call a casual employment information statement, which is on the Fair Work website. You give that to them when the employee starts as a casual and then at their 12-month anniversary. And then that tells the casual employee about this process. So it informs them about this process so that they can then come to you and say, I believe I'm a permanent now because I've been doing these hours every week, week in, week out for more than 12 months, and I would like to transition to permanency. And that's what allows them to do that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think that's super important information. And do you know, we have listeners a lot in Australia, but also in the States. Is it similar in different countries, do you know, or is it really variable?
Every country has very different employment laws. I'm not aware of the ins and outs of the state's employment laws. I don't believe they have the same casual conversion, but they will have their own laws in the United States and in every other country as well. And it's important that in wherever you're based, that you are right across your employment law obligations. And, it's the same as if you're engaging staff in other countries, that you may need to be aware of their particular employment laws as well.
Mm-hmm. So in general, in Australia, we would, whether you're an instructor or whether you're a studio owner, this type of information is available on things like Fair Work Australia, is it?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's fairwork.gov.au in Australia. All of this information is available there for you, and there is a hotline that you can call if you can't find it or you're not sure. You can submit online inquiries. There are search functions, and there are even little training videos on there to help you as well. But all of the information is on that website.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's so many things that we need to know, whether or not you're an instructor or whether you are looking at taking on other staff. You want to make sure if you are on the receiving end, so if you're looking at hiring other staff, that you really do understand exactly what you are required to do, because I'm sure many of us have heard of nasty stories, either of studios who didn't pay superannuation because they didn't know, or, who didn't pay staff the way that they were meant to be paid because they didn't know. So if we, in our industry, in Australia anyway, I'm sorry for you guys in the States and elsewhere that are listening, but hopefully even having this conversation is going to encourage you to double check with whoever it is that sets all of these standards for your workplace. But in Australia, Pilates instructors, if you are employed, we are employed under the Fitness Award. And the Fitness Award does state in there, there's different levels. And so it doesn't specifically say Pilates, but you can look at the different levels of this is what you should be capable of doing to be at this pay scale. Now, when we are looking at that, Kristy-Lee, is it fair to say that you could say if you're a level 7 and yes, you hit all of those points and yes, that's what I'm doing in my workplace, is it fair to say that that award is the number that you would be expected to pay? Or does from that award, say it's $44 or something, then does it vary a lot depending on studios or depending on states? Or like, how do I actually know, is that what I should be paying or is it too much, too little or whatever? Just a quick little interruption to say a big thank you to listening to the Pilates Lounge podcast. This podcast is all about sharing our love of movement and Pilates with as many people as possible. So if you're enjoying the show, please take a moment to review us so that we can get the word out there. Also, if you haven't joined us on the Pilates Muse newsletter, it's a bi-weekly newsletter that shares a whole load of information with you. And we also have virtual online education programs. So if you're looking to get inspired and grow even more as a Pilates professional, check us out, www.thepilatesprofessional.com.au. Back to the show.
Yeah, good question. So yeah, the awards here in Australia and most countries will have some kind of similar structure in place where it sets minimum standards. And in Australia, that is the modern award system. And as you said, Fitness Award is the award for instructors, but it will be a different award if you are hiring an admin person. So just be aware of that. But what the award system does here in Australia is it sets the minimum standards. So whatever the pay rate is, as you said, you've decided, yep, this is the correct level. You've looked at it and you've said that's ticking all the boxes. The pay rate associated with that level is purely the minimum that you need to pay. And like with lots of industries, often to get good people, you need to pay more than the minimum. So in terms of what you should be paying, at least what the award says at the minimum, but you may need to pay more than that because of the marketplace. You know, it's a supply-demand kind of issue with any employment marketplace around the world. So if there's not enough people, the prices tend to go up. Or, you know, if you've got 30,000 Pilates instructors in your neighbourhood, then you can probably pay the award. So it is very much dependent on the market. And that's why, you know, in certain areas, you might be paying more to get someone because the market is very tight. And, you know, maybe in some areas you can afford to pay a little less, but not less than the award. So the market will kind of determine what you need to pay. And in terms of assessing what everyone else is paying in the market, use your network is always the best way to do things. So your other Pilates colleagues that you know that are running their studios, just ask them, hey, what are you paying your instructors? I just want to get a guide for what everyone's paying. I know lots of industries that do that quite actively just to make sure that a bit of a pulse check really, that they're kind of roughly in the right ballpark. And if you've got trusted colleagues, from your community that you can reach out to, that's a great way to just sort of get a bit of a pulse check. Our community does that. They're always in there saying, hey, is this about right? So just asking around is a great way to just assess what's market. Also, when you're talking to potential instructors, if you're going to employ someone, I always ask people, what hourly rate are you looking for? And people are a bit scared to talk about money with potential employees or even potential contractors. But I think having the money conversation, calmly and directly up front, just make sure everyone's on the same page. So, they might say, well, I'm getting this much at the other studio that I'm working in, or last time I did this is what my rate was. And it just gives you a guide. It doesn't mean you have to offer specifically that, but it gives you a guide as to what their expectations are. And if you've got every applicant giving you the same number, that's probably what the market is.
Yes, agreed. And I don't know about other industries, but sometimes it can feel like if you've got a studio down the road, you might not be asking them what they're going to be paying their employees, because it feels like competition. But the way that we do it, I mean, I live somewhere where we're in a very small community, so I might not directly ask other Pilates studio owners, but some of my friends are gym owners or physiotherapists. So think of what type of industries might marry well with what you're doing, and you could get comparable of what, even what somebody is paying a casual physiotherapist in Australia is probably fair to say that if you're employing a clinical Pilates instructor, they're going to be about on par. If somebody is employing a fitness leader and you are wanting an instructor to teach reformer fitness classes or mat classes, then you're probably on par. So it's okay to gather some holistic information from alternative sources, but similar industries.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's a great idea. It's a great other strategy.
Yeah. Okay, so I did have one other question. What was that? I can't think. Maybe I'll come back to it. But I was thinking something else about contractors, but I can't think. Maybe I'll come back to it at some stage. So when we are thinking of hiring, it's such a huge deal, because we put our heart and soul into this business. Like literally, it is our baby, and now we need to bring in some help, whether it's another instructor or admin or whoever it is. What are some of the biggest hiring mistakes that people make, and how can we avoid them?
It's such a good question. And it does feel really like quite a big deal when you first look at hiring staff. It feels stressful and overwhelming, and it can feel like you're really out of your depth. But I think the biggest mistake that I see most people make when they've gone from solo, just them, to their first hire is their initial instinct is to want to clone themselves. So they go looking for someone just like them. And the problem with that is you aren't going to find that person. So it's a search that's only going to leave you not happy and dissatisfied, or employing someone with these expectations that they're simply not going to meet. And that's because someone who is entrepreneurial and looking to grow their business and grow their team has a very different mindset to someone who wants to be an employee. And that's totally fine. They're just different. So don't look to clone yourself. And this is where the other mistake comes in. People aren't really clear about specifically what they're hiring for. And when that happens, you end up hiring the wrong person. So what I encourage people to do to avoid those mistakes is spend some time really thinking about and putting together what you need in this role. And often in industries like Pilates, it's a matter of, do I want an instructor or do I want some other kind of admin or other support? And you get to choose. That's the great thing. If you love doing all the instructing and hate doing the other parts of running the business, don't hire an instructor, because you'll end up doing more of the other side of the business. So in that case, you want to sit down and think about, what is it that you want to still do day in and day out in your business? And what are the things you don't enjoy doing? And hire someone to do those things, because that way you're doing the things that really light you up, and you're getting someone who is skilled and capable to do the things that you really don't enjoy doing. And that might be the admin side of things. So, conversely, some people have had enough of instructing. They enjoy running the business, but they've lost their love for instructing, or they don't want to do as much instructing. And in that case, hiring an instructor is a much better option. But having that clarity before you even start looking is really important. I know that sounds a little obvious, but so often when we get to the point of hiring, we've often left it a bit late. We've waited till we're totally stretched and totally stressed and overwhelmed, and we aren't usually thinking clearly when we're in that state. So spending some time to think about that, and maybe even hiring before you feel quite ready, is a great strategy as well. But that can feel scary. So maybe that looks like getting some contract or VA support first to free up your time before you go down that employee path. If you're hesitant or not feeling ready, that can be a great first step. and getting that support. Then once you realize how much value that brings and how helpful that is, you might feel more confident to go down the actual employing someone path. So there's different ways to approach it, but getting the clarity first, so you're not rushing into it, will mean you go to the market, whether you're getting a contractor, a VA, an employee, looking for the right person. And when you've got that clarity, you'll find the right person much more quickly. But don't clone yourself. That's definitely not the answer.
Yeah, this is great information. There's only room for one of you in the workplace, and nobody's ever going to have the passion that you have about your business anyway, And so as business owners, we're a special breed. We are like octopus. We see everything. We can get our hands on everything. It's not, we have a different drive. And sometimes the best person to come into your business is somebody who does not have that drive, because they can sometimes help ground you, help you realize the importance of having maybe a little bit more consistency in the day-to-day things, and not having somebody who wants to get their hands on everyone. That's been one of the biggest lessons that I've learned. I remember an instructor saying to me one day, because she had just started work, and I've learned this over the years, not to jump on my staff as soon as they come in, because I've got a million things in my head, and I want to quickly say things to them and share things with them. And I've learned, let them come into the studio, let them settle down, and then ask them, do you have a minute? Whereas I used to jump on them. Hey, how you going? I've got this. And I remember an instructor literally breaking down in tears in that moment. And she said, you know what? Not all of us can do a million things at once. And I was like, oh, okay. I didn't realize that I was that person.
Yes.
But that's just my personality. So not everybody is like that. And also, it's so important, to your point, Kristy-Lee, figuring out, is it another instructor that you need, or are you better off getting an admin person or a VA? Now, we do have another episode coming up with a friend who has a VA company, so we'll speak about that more. But sometimes you could employ somebody who is going to be on a lower pay grade than what you might be on as an instructor. So are you better off employing somebody who doesn't cost you as much as an instructor, just to get a little bit of help before you start that next bit of expansion?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
So
yeah, and there's options for that. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely something to consider. So what do you think are the 3 top qualities or skills that we should be looking for in other employees or even subcontractors? What are the top main things that we should be keeping our ears and eyes open for?
Yeah, really good question. The first one is a values alignment. So what you want in anyone that you're engaging in your business is someone who is aligned with your particular personal and business values. Because if there's a values mismatch, so if they don't agree with how you think and feel about things, they're never going to quite commit psychologically to your business. They might come in and go through the motions and tick some boxes, but they're never going to have that extra engagement and that extra sense of passion and pride about your business. So you really want to look for that values alignment. Now, that doesn't mean they have to be 100% aligned, but you do want some level of alignment. So whether that, if your particular passion is around, women going through a certain phase of life, for example, or about, whatever it might be, you want someone who is aligned with that passion and who wants to come on that journey with you. Now, as we've already said, that doesn't mean they're going to be the same as you or think exactly like you. But if they're aligned with your values, they're going to be thinking in accordance with those, and they will see things and make actions towards things that are more suited to the direction that you're going in. So it's really important that they are aligned in that way. And that can be a little tricky to assess, but it's about asking questions in your interviewing process or your contractor engagement process to really understand them personally, what their personal motivations are, what their personal values are. And that will help tell you whether there is a sense of alignment there. And you can tell when you ask someone and they really light up talking about things and it's something that's aligned with you, that's probably a good, indicator that there is alignment. And that's probably the most important thing, because you can teach skills in most cases, But if someone's values are completely misaligned, it's going to be a disaster down the track. So I think first and foremost, that's a really important one. I think secondly, someone who is coachable. And this is important because you're going to do things in your business your way. So even if someone has done this exact same job, and whether that's an instructor or whether that's an admin support or anyone else, there's going to be ways that you do things that are unique to your business. You know, how you like customers greeted, for example, or how you want things put into your system, or how you like classes to start and finish in your particular studio. So you want someone that's coachable, that isn't stuck in their particular ways, that is willing to adapt and do things your way. And I think that's universal no matter who you get into your business. And that doesn't mean that they can't bring their own sense of genius to your business, but you want to be able to articulate how you want things done and how you do things, and for them to be coachable to do things that way. And I think that's a really universally important trait. And thirdly, you want someone who is really suited to whatever job you are hiring. So not hiring someone that's great with finances if you want them to do creative things, for example, or not hiring someone that really, likes small classes if you have big classes that you like to run at your studio. So getting someone who's really solid and strong at the role you are hiring for, and not trying to put a square peg in a round hole, are probably the three universal things that no matter what role you're hiring for, and whether it's employee or a contractor, they're the things I'd be looking for, definitely.
Yeah, okay. And what about when it comes to like hiring for potential rather than just experience? Is that something that we should be considering as well?
I think it definitely is something to be considering as part of the factor that you're looking at. And it probably all depends where you're at in your business journey and your team journey, and how much time you've got to dedicate to helping that person reach their potential. So if it's a matter of they're not quite qualified yet, or they're not quite as experienced as you would like them to be, but they're super motivated, the values are really well aligned, they're really coachable, they're really motivated to learn, and you've got time to get them there, great, excellent. They're probably going to be a really good hire. But if that same person's coming into your business when you are totally stretched, you've got zero time to onboard or train or coach, they probably won't reach their potential as quickly. And there could be some resentment there from your end because they're not able to jump in straight away. So I definitely think it's a great factor looking at and to consider in people, but it will depend on where you're at as to how much of a factor that can be, and whether you've got the time to help that person reach their potential, or whether you need someone right now to just hit the ground running, and that's the second person you might hire, that future potential person.
Yeah, to be sure. And I wonder if this happens across all industries. There always seems like there's never enough Pilates instructors to go around the world. Is that just
happens in a few industries? It's not just you. Look, it's allied health across the board too. That's a real challenge across a lot of these sectors, that finding people, and not enough people are coming into the space. Or I think for Pilates in particular, people that come into the space often want to work for themselves, so then they aren't available to be an employee for you. And the challenge there is often the win there is you find someone that has tried to run their own business and has decided they hate running a business, but they still love to be a Pilates instructor. They can be really great employees. But I think when it's hard to find people, and obviously this is one of those spaces, be constantly on the lookout. So when someone does happen to be there, even if you weren't planning to hire, you might be looking to grab them because they're there and figure out how you can keep them busy, because you know that it might be 12 months before you're going to see someone else who is available.
It's so true. Two of those things are so true. Like one of my full-timers, she tried running her own studio and she said she hated it. So it's that whole, just because you're and she's an amazing instructor, just because you're a great instructor, it doesn't mean that you are going to enjoy running a business. So if you're listening to this and you're considering opening your own studio, really look into it, because running a business is a completely different monster than teaching people. And if you want to really thrive and enjoy doing that, you need to be up for the challenge. It's a huge challenge. It's a roller coaster ride where teaching people can be very consistent. There's this sense of serving other people all the time, which is very fulfilling. And you can literally work wherever you want, anywhere in the world. But also it is that figuring out if you do have a business, how am I going to make this sustainable? And in our business, you guys know, if you listen to me for any length of time, that I do teacher training, that I created a teacher training platform specifically because I live in a remote place, and it was the best way to make sure that we are always feeling the opportunities that are coming up. And living in a remote place also means that we're very transient. So as much as we might get 10 brand new instructors coming through every 6 months, we're taking the top 2 instructors and knowing that we might have 2 to 5 years with them before they leave where I live. So teacher training is a fantastic way for you as a studio owner or as a small business entrepreneur to consider continually having this stream of really well-educated instructors. And they're educated in a way that when Kristy-Lee was talking about values, they come into your studio and they get to understand your values from the get-go. And so then you can figure out as you're training them, which one of these students is the right one for me. So if I'll do a little bit of a plug here, if you are looking for that opportunity, sing out. We do have host studios around Australia, and we can look at it in the States as well or anywhere. If you're looking at that, it is a great way. But again, it's another kettle of fish. It's not just instructing. So I took myself on a little bit of a tangent. I always do that. But how can I? So if I say I've found the best instructor in the world, I'm doing all the right things, what are some ways that I can ensure that staff member stays with me, when they could teach anywhere in the world? It's not just going to come down to the money that I pay them. What are some things that I need to consider if I'm going to be employing people?
Yeah, this is so important because I think people think, well, I've hired them. Great. They're just going to be here for as long as I want them to be. And the reality is that is not the case. They are, and any employee is with your business for a period of time, but not forever. So you do need to put some strategies in place, particularly if there's someone that you absolutely love and don't want to lose, to ensure that you can keep them for as long as possible. And these are what we call engagement strategies or retention strategies. And the most important thing of all is to make sure that your employee is motivated to be with your business. And surprisingly, this surprises a lot of people, it's not about money. I mean, you've got to pay them well enough, of course, you can't be underpaying them, but it's not the most important thing for most people. And I would say it's certainly not the most important thing for most Pilates instructors, because it's not the sort of thing people get into because they're chasing huge corporate CEO dollars. They get into it because they love it and they love what they do and they love the people that they serve. So what this comes down to is understanding what motivates this individual and what's important to them right now. So it's really knowing your people at an individual level. And if you can align what's important to them with the business and what they do in your business, you'll create what we call intrinsic motivation, which is that deep connection to the business. And when someone's got that, they're not actively looking. They're not going to look for something else. And unless something changes for them, they won't look to leave your business. Now, as you said, in your case, Katie, people are in an area where it is transient, so they will move on. But for the time they are in that location, it's about ensuring that they wouldn't be looking to go and join another studio. You're giving them no reason to search. So it's giving them that underlying, internal motivation first. And so that is, do I feel looked after here? Is this safe? Do I feel like I'm part of a team, a community, part of something bigger than me? And does this align with what's personally important to me right now? And that can change, of course, over time for all of your team members. So, a great example is, that maybe one of your team members is a parent and they've got their child starting school this year. their priorities are going to shift if that's where they're at personally. And if you can align things maybe to help avoid needing to work during school drop-off and pick-up times, just as an example, that reciprocity that you've said, I know that this is going to be a tricky time of day for you, so how about we do this to help? That reciprocity goes a really long way. So just really knowing your employees well and aligning is really important. And of course, then you want to have them feel like they're part of the journey. So making sure, as I said earlier, the values are aligned, but also what are the goals? How can they help contribute to those? Are you growing studio? Maybe you want to incentivize them to help bring in new clients and customers, or maybe you want them to add to their class list. So really helping, if you can align the business goals and the individual goals, that's where it's really, the golden sort of scenario. But really getting that motivation right is really important. And of course, from a retention perspective, people want to feel seen, heard, and valued. So do they know what's expected of them? Do they know how they're going against those expectations? Are they being thanked and rewarded appropriately when they do a good job or go above and beyond? All of those things are important. But when it comes to retaining people, you get to be creative as well. So, some businesses like to give little gifts or take people out to lunch. All those things can help, but you've got to get the underlying motivation bedded in first. Otherwise, you're just throwing money at a wall, basically, with those other incentives. But there's all different strategies you can use, but there's some of the important sort of factors, I think.
Yeah, it's so true. It's definitely creating a space where everybody feels valued and where everybody feels that they can shine. But also, it's because we do work in an industry where we give a lot of energy all day long. It's give, 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 give. And of course, there is a reciprocal energy that changes place there, but most of it is us giving. And so what I see with instructors is then, as the studio owner, I've got to be the one giving my energy back to them. So you need to be able to have space to be able to do that for your team, to make sure that then the energy that you offer them, they're able to then give to the clients, and then that creates almost a cycle of good energy going around. And it's doing things out of the studio. It's further education with your staff. It's so important as studio owners that we offer, whether it's one day a month or one day a week, where maybe not everybody can make it, but everybody knows that on this day we all get together and we either do a class together or we touch on a topic. It gives us time, because a lot of the time we don't even see each other in a studio. So if you're only coming one day a week teaching 2 hours, then you might not see half the other people that teach there. But as far as our clients are concerned and our community, we need to have this cohesiveness. So making space where there is an opportunity for everybody to get together is super important. But I agree with you, having things in place where, whether it's lunches or a gift that you give, or I always just send flowers at everybody's birthday. Who receives flowers these days? It's these small things of gratification that you are offering that goes way beyond what goes in somebody's pocket.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Okay, so as we start to wrap up, Kristy-Lee, let's touch on something a little bit uncomfortable. How do we deal with these difficult conversations of, say, I've got an underperforming instructor or somebody who isn't showing up? How do I deal with conflict resolution?
This is everyone's absolute bane of their existence as an employer. No one likes doing this. But what I will share is that putting it off only makes it worse. So don't be afraid to have these conversations. And I think if you go into these conversations with an approach of seeking first to understand, rather than going in there saying, this isn't working, I'm not happy with this, seek first to understand. And that will usually, firstly, turn down the energy and any aggression or any tension. But it also might mean you get enough information to course correct in a more positive way. But you definitely don't want to put off these conversations. So if something isn't going right, firstly, have the conversation. And a great way to open the conversation is, thanks for meeting with me today. I just wanted to have a chat to you about a few things. What I've noticed is, so just really plainly saying what you've seen. And then following that with, I'm keen to understand more from your perspective. can you tell me more? And some really open-ended questions. And it might be that the person is unsure about what direction you wanted them to go in with the class, or has been having a really stressful time at home and knows they aren't showing up particularly well at work, or wasn't aware that that was your expectation, or maybe they just are underperforming. But it's always great to ask for their input first. So firstly, that helps the employee feel seen and heard in that process. And it also gives you information to tell you how aware they are of this particular issue. And once you've got that out on the table, you can start to then go through what the course correction needs to look at. And that might mean explaining to them the impact this is having on the clients, the business, the team, whatever it might be, and get them to participate in coming up with the solution. So how do you think we might be able to rectify this? Is there some training that we can offer you? Or, if it's a performance issue in that sense, or do you think it would be a great idea if we got the team together to have a discussion about this? Or what ideas have you got as to how we can solve this? And sometimes these conversations need to happen over a couple of conversations. So it might be, why don't you go away and have a think about it, give you some time to really digest what we've spoken about, and let's look back together on Friday and have another chat. Because depending on the personality of the person that you're talking to, some people can come up with ideas and want to participate in that conversation right there on the spot and they're ready. Other people need time to process and to think. And the concept of having to get to a solution in that meeting that they didn't know was about to happen can be really overwhelming. So again, this is about knowing your employees to know which personality you're dealing with, but it can often be a good idea to lay it out on the table really calmly, listen, and then loop back. And I think importantly in these conversations, particularly often us as business owners feel like we need to do all the talking and we need to fill in any silence because we don't like silence. We're a bit uncomfortable with it a lot of the time. But actually just sitting in silence for a moment and leaving space allows the employee to participate more fully, even if we're uncomfortable with that silence. And a lot of people that I coach and work with, it's the silence that they really struggle with. And just sit for a couple of seconds is the biggest challenge, because that can allow the employee to say, oh, okay, I didn't realize I was doing that, or I thought that was the best way to do it, or whatever the response might be. So firstly, have the conversation first and foremost, really be solutions focused, and it might mean over a couple of conversations. But if the performance is still an issue, you might need to go down the path of doing some performance management, being more forceful in that process, because you don't want to keep people on that are not performing. And often we are too slow to exit people from our business when they are underperforming. But in the first instance, have the conversation and be ready to listen with curiosity so that you can better understand what's really going on, because often the symptoms that we see aren't the real cause of the issue, and then try and find some solutions and get the employee invested in those solutions so that hopefully you can course correct pretty quickly.
I love this. And never assume. Just because somebody is showing up as something at work, we never know what's going on in people's lives. And as much as we don't want any staff bringing their life problems to the studio, if we are the person who steps onto the floor to open the conversation, sometimes you will learn things about your instructors that you could never imagine. And sometimes that conversation is all they need, So I agree, be the person who is the first. And I love that sit in silence. It can be the most uncomfortable thing, but if you hold space for somebody, it works with clients as well. If you're trying to figure out a client, rather than continually telling them what to do and continually teaching them, just let them do something and be quiet. And sometimes that creates an environment where something can happen. It's such good information. I love that, Kristy-Lee. Thank you so much. All right. So I feel like this conversation could go on for a long, long time because it has so much value for so many people. But I am also very aware of your time. Now, tell us, if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, where is your beautiful face most shown? Where do you show it most?
I shop most either on Instagram, which is just Kristy.Lee.Billett, or in our Facebook group, HR Support for Australian Businesses, or you can find me on the website, which is peoplepoweredbusiness.com.au.
Okay, fantastic. Now, we will have all of that in the show notes. And if you, either way, whether you're an instructor who needs support figuring out what you should be doing, or whether you're a studio owner, Kristy-Lee has some great resources on her website. So definitely jump on in there. And most of those resources, because I did have a little bit of a look, most of those resources do apply to a lot of small business. And she is a wealth of information. I know that you've got a free webinar coming up on the 18th of February. This podcast will go out before then. And the webinar is specifically all about hiring right. So Kristy-Lee has a great hiring right formula. So jump in on that free webinar, even if you are just starting to figure things out for yourself. And remember, folks, if you are a growing business, we do offer an invitation for you to become a host studio with Pilates Pro Academy. I do have a brand new host studio up near Toowoomba in Queensland. LEB from Elevation Studios has jumped on board this year, and we already have a couple of students going to be joining her in March. So this is a fantastic way for you to continue to grow your business, but also for you to share your expertise and your passion as a Pilates professional with the next generation of Pilates instructors. So let me know if this is something that you are interested. But in the meantime, thank you so much, Kristy-Lee, for your wealth of information. I know that this has been so helpful and supportive for all of our small business entrepreneurs out there.
Thanks, Katie. It's been great to be with you today. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Fantastic. And I'll be seeing you in just a couple of weeks down in Sydney.
Yay!
All right, everybody, thanks so much for joining me. My name's Katie Crane. I'm the Pilates professional, and having you in the studio next week, every Wednesday, as usual, for the Pilates Lounge podcast. Goodbye for now, my friends.